Okay, I think we'll get started there. Like I said, thanks very much everybody for turning up today to find out a bit more about the Transition Fund as part of the Island Centre for Net Zero Outer Hebrides. Myself, Matthew Logan, and my colleague Joan Darcy will be taking the session today, and we're really just wanting to give a bit of initial information about the fund, how the kind of assessment is going to work, and an opportunity to ask any questions. We've kind of got a few weeks, a couple of months still until the end of the fund, so we're kind of expecting that there will be questions, and the guidance may evolve just to make sure we're covering all the points needed. So we do welcome feedback and questions at this point. It's good to see some familiar faces who we've spoken to about the fund previously, and also lots of new faces. So yeah, really appreciate everybody for coming along, and I hope it's going to be a useful session today. In terms of the structure of the day, we're going to have a bit of just a general kind of context about the Island Centre for Net Zero and the Transition Fund itself. I'm aware that some people might be fairly new coming to this, and it won't be as drilled into everyone's heads as it is into mine. I seem to give this presentation most days, or definitely did leading up to Christmas. But yeah, just a bit of a refresher on that. And then Joan will take us through a bit more about the guidance and eligibility kind of criteria and documents around the fund, the key dates, some stuff around the eligibility, and yeah, just a few other kind of bits and pieces, but fairly standard stuff. And then at the end, we will have some time for questions. So I'd ask everyone, yeah, just to keep probably muted until then, jot your questions down, and then we'll come to them at the end. So the Island Centre for Net Zero is a 10-year project working to support Orkney, Shetland, and importantly for us, the Outer Hebrides on their path to net zero emissions. It's a large project, part of the island's growth deal, a total of 16.5 million of core funding, and that's split across various different kind of work packages, some of which is reserved for the transition fund that we're discussing today. The high level kind of priorities of the project of the Island Centre for Net Zero are there on the screen. So reaching net zero emissions, supporting job creation and supply chain development whilst doing that, supporting other islands growth deal projects with net zero ambitions and kind of helping to inform their development, and then building a kind of international reputation for the islands as somewhere that is taking the lead on net zero and transitioning to more sustainable ways of living and working, and somewhere where kind of research and development work can happen. So these priorities are important. They're kind of reflected in the guidance and the assessment criteria that we have, and they'll be what we're using to kind of make decisions, what the board are using to make decisions on which projects are approved and supported going forward. If people aren't too aware, the ICNZ, as I said, is part of the island's growth deal. So the island's growth deal is an 100 million funding package for Orkney, Shetland, and the Western Isles over 10 years. We're sort of coming into the third year of the deal at the end of this financial year. And the ICNZ is one of the projects that goes across all three. So as is typical in these kind of regional growth deals that are supported by the government, there's a bit of a focus on capital projects, on new kind of development in that sense, and that remains the case with the Transition Fund. We are looking for capital decarbonisation projects. And yeah, in our case, we're supported by both the UK and Scottish governments through the Islands Growth Deal. In terms of our project itself, it's a 7 kind of party partnership. So a lot of partners based up in Orkney kind of coordinating development of the Island Centre for Net Zero as a centre itself, and then local kind of delivery partners as well. So the European Marine Energy Centre, Aquaterra, ourselves at Community Energy Scotland, and Heriot Watt University, and then the 3 island councils also there to deliver kind of locally. In terms of locally in the Outer Hebrides, we have a partnership of delivery partners, which involves the Corla, who are the main kind of grant recipient, ourselves, Community Energy Scotland, who are leading on the project management and development, UHI, Northwest Hebrides, who are leading on the research aspects and generally collaborating on things like the fund as well. And then we've also been working with Baranvati Community Limited in terms of looking at project development down in Barra and Uist as well. The themes of the ICNZ are very open, and that also applies to the transition fund itself. Whilst we do have a number of criteria in terms of what kind of technologies we're looking at and what kind of projects we're looking at, we're very open book and we're interested in a range of different options. So really just looking at things that will support moving to net zero. So things that will decarbonize, will offer people less emissions heavy options, or will reduce emissions from the islands. These were just kind of a wide set of initial examples, but we're kind of open to any other ideas that kind of fit within the net zero field as well. And in terms of a bit of an example project of what has come through so far and what has been funded by the Island Centre for Net Zero so far, we would look at the Creed Hydrogen Skills and Innovation Centre, which some people may have heard of already, although it's still kind of in development at the moment and approaching construction. So it's going to be a purpose-built training and test centre at the Creed Recycling Centre near Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis. Basically builds on a legacy of previous kind of hydrogen innovation projects that have happened up there, which have involved various kind of initiatives of dual fuel vehicles running on hydrogen, generating hydrogen and oxygen, and using the oxygen for fish farming, and generally just trying to use surplus energy to maximize the benefit of that in terms of producing hydrogen. So it's building on that history and that experience, but creating a bit more of a substantial centre there where both training courses can be run, and there'll also be opportunities for businesses to come in and trial electrolyzers and other types of technology, and hopefully something that kind of is a bit of a cornerstone in terms of allowing wider trials of hydrogen technologies or adoption throughout the islands. So I think the Creed project is a good example of something that is capital focused in terms of building that centre and the equipment it will bring in, but gives a lot of wider opportunities in terms of the training, the scope to kind of host more development activity on the site, and the potential for kind of future spin-offs. So although not every project needs to look like this, or look, it could look very different to this, but I think that's a good kind of example of how that project is kind of meeting some of the ambitions in terms of that job creation, supply chain, and hopefully also offering ways to reduce emissions by switching vehicles onto hydrogen. Just to go back to kind of the goals and the priorities, so this is a bit more detail of the kind of goals that are associated with the Island Centre for Net Zero project. So evidence acceleration of decarbonisation across the islands, across Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles. This is creation of 100 new jobs and 200 transition jobs, stimulation of economic growth across the supply chains, and supporting the other projects, and then developing this kind of expertise and capability. And I think that's something that we're aware, people who work in the islands are aware, that we have a lot of great case studies, great examples of innovative work, of community-led projects and innovative net zero work already. So it's partly just about promoting that and boosting that, and kind of getting some recognition about that on a wider level. In terms of the rough kind of model of the project, so as I said, we're about to go into the third year. So we kind of have this approach of the first 2 years have really been about establishing the staff team, some of the structures around the ICNZ, and getting a bit of a baseline understanding of sources of emissions at the moment. Next, looking to start developing projects and developing ideas, and part of that is through the transition fund, and then moving into delivery after that. So it's worth saying, and I kind of emphasize in this, that because of the nature of the island's growth deal and just the kind of approval process we need to go through to get government approval from both governments, and kind of just to ensure that everything is aligning, we are looking at a fairly lengthy process from today's call, from when people will submit their proposals to when kind of funds will be available or projects will actually start. So this is just a bit of a breakdown of the timeline. We have the information session today. The deadline for the fund is going to be on the 21st of March, and then hopefully successful, should be getting back to you after a week of reviewing those on the 28th, just to let people know who's been successful and hopefully giving some feedback there as well. We are thinking of, and I think it's likely that we're going to be having another kind of Q&A session in February, probably around the middle, maybe the week of the 10th or the following week. So we'll make sure to send that on to everyone who's signed up today, just in case at that point you're wanting to drop in with any more specific questions about the fund. But yeah, so slightly different maybe to other funds. Once projects have been approved, or proposals have been approved on the 28th of March, we'll then enter a period where the ICNZ delivery team, so myself, Joan, and a couple of other colleagues, will work alongside whoever has submitted the proposals, just to kind of refine them, get them up to the level of detail needed for the final business case, which is the format of document that needs submitted to the governments to kind of be approved and for that funding to be drawn down. So that will probably take 2-3 months, and then the estimated time we've had from the government in terms of that approval process is about 6 months. So we're probably realistically looking at projects who would be proposing, projects being proposed for now, that they'd be starting development construction in 2026. But yeah, hopefully that gives plenty of time for everything to kind of get aligned. So I think that's probably enough from me just now. I'll hand over to Joan, who's got a bit more specific information about the fund itself and the various kind of guidance documents and criteria involved.
Thank you, Matthew. My name is Joan. I'm the Research and Development Coordinator working on the ICNZ project, but I'm employed through UHI. I'm just going to give you kind of the nitty-gritty of the application process. So the first thing to do is once you go into the Transition Fund website, is to make yourself familiar with these 3 documents. So the assessment guidance, the proposal template, and the fund eligibility guidance. I'll go into them in a bit more detail. But basically my presentation is just going to show you the relevant and important bits within these documents. Matthew? So these are the key dates that Matthew mentioned already. I don't think he mentioned that the fund is 2.86 million and that the grant size we're looking to fund is 350,000 and upwards. And then the dates again, the fund is open and the closing date is 21st of March. And then the week commencing the 24th, we'll start looking into the applications, and then people will be informed after that. Matthew? So the first thing you want to know is your project eligible? So have a look in the assessment guidance. Make yourself familiar with the ICNZ objectives, which Matthew has mentioned a couple of times already. So that is you want your project to aim for net zero, to support green jobs, supply chain and development, and all the objectives that he's mentioned already. So it needs to be based within the Outer Hebrides. So we were looking for a range of projects that will spread over all the islands, and that it needs to be ready. So is your project in a state of readiness that it can come 2026, if it's accepted, is it ready to go? Matthew? The next is just the type of organizations that can apply for it. So just any kind of business, non-profit organization, charity, public sector body, SMEs, startups, and academic or research institutions. Just make sure you know that it is a capital fund. So there's certain criteria in this, the Outer Hebrides Transition Fund eligibility guidance. If you look in here in section 2, it's going to give you details about what exactly capital funds cover with regards to the criteria put out by the Islands Growth Deal. The next most important thing, do you have the financial capabilities to complete the project? So the important thing is that the project has to be claimed back in arrears. So you must have the finance or loans in place so that you can start with the project and then claim back incrementally. And the details of that will be set out in an offer letter if you get it. So Matthew? Then it's just the proposal template. So it's pretty straightforward. Like any proposal template, just make sure you fill everything in, and just at the moment we're just looking for a budget estimate, and we can work into the finer details once if you get accepted and we go into the business case, we start working out a business case. And then just remember for the date of the proposal, as Matthew mentioned already, it'll be 2006, and then projects can run up to 2030. Matthew? So within the proposal document, then you have to describe your project. So I think we just wanted kind of a brief description to give us an idea of what the project is about. So within the objectives, we just want the specific goals and how in relation to net zero. The problem you want to look at in terms of greenhouse gas, how so describe the problem in terms of greenhouse gas reduction and the urgency and critical needs. So is your project, I don't know, looking at renewables or looking for, I don't know, insulating domestic houses, for example? So then the problem would be that it's using an awful lot of energy, and therefore by insulating you would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. With the project outline, this will just be how you're going to run the project. So what are your goals? What challenges would you foresee? Are there any specific requirements that the project would need? And then is there any relative background? Like, have you done any feasibility studies? Is there, for example, local energy plans or any government studies or data that you can draw on to help support your application? Matthew? And within these, the project objectives, problem and outline, we have a scoring criteria, and this is in the guidance assessment. So this is all in the guidance assessment. You could read this. So for example, you would score a 4 if the project is highly relevant and presented in a compelling, persuasive manner with a robust supporting evidence. Then, and it goes all the way down to 0, which would be not acceptable, which means it's inadequate, it's failing to demonstrate it's to meet the requirements that we require for the project. Matthew? So next we have a number of assessment questions. So this will help us to evaluate if your project aligns with the ICNZ goals a bit further. And this also has a weighted scoring method. And there's examples of this in the appendix, which isn't uploaded onto the website yet, but we just had to make some adjustments to it, and it will be uploaded shortly. So Matthew, can we just look at the next one for the? So these are how we're going to look at the assessment criteria. So the questions are going to be around net zero, the challenge that is presented, the counterfactual, what will happen if your project doesn't go ahead, replicable learning, green job creation, supply chain development, commercialization, fairness and equity, its alignment to the Islands Growth Deal, international reputation, and community and stakeholder development. So each of these questions is kind of weighed and will be scored, and this will be in the appendix, which, as I said, will be uploaded shortly. So for example, the questions regarded to net zero will have a heavy scoring of 15, where other ones with regards to community engagement will be a little less, it'll be 5. So, but this is explained in the assessment guidance. So again, if you score a 4, this means the project has a clear, convincing strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it goes all the way down to 0, where basically your project doesn't help eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, and that was score a 0. So Matthew? Now, so next we have some just additional additional information that we would like. So we want you to think about feasibility and the viability. So you have to think of this in an island context. So this is going to be done in an island, which may incur extra costs and might have different technical and operational difficulties that you may not face, for example, if you're working in the island. So when you're working out your budget and how you're going to execute the project, take in the island aspect into consideration. Then it'll be your the impact. So we're looking at social, environmental, and economic impact. So this will be assessed based on the project goals and outcomes. Who are the stakeholders and who will benefit from the project, knowing that we want the project to benefit the Outer Hebrides and the communities within there. And then just generally looking back on the project scope, timeline, and budget. Then with value, we're looking for strategic and innovative value. So strategic being that it aligns with the ICNZ goals and objectives, and innovative that'll have new technologies, processes, ideas, or projects that'll be transformational to the communities within the Outer Hebrides. Matthew? So the next would be, this is pretty standard stuff for, I won't go into in too much details, but just that you would outline your deliverables, timelines and milestones. How would you measure your success, risk and mitigation, and any related documents, like any legal documents or any studies relating to, what am I looking at? So if you look at, when you're looking at your the project proposal, any kind of studies or feasibility studies that you've done, or any letters of support by community or industry that you think would be relevant and help support your application. So next, Matthew. So that's it. So next would be the submission. So all applications should be submitted to Matthew by the 21st of March. And at that time, we want all the supporting documents to be with it. Please be concise, be thorough, and submit a final version plus any accompanying documents, and please meet the deadlines. Matthew? So that's it for me then, and then if there's just any questions.
Yeah, so we're just so there, I'll stop sharing my screen for now, and yeah, just open up to any questions. So I think if people just use the hand raising function, and then we'll just let people come in one at a time, that would be great. David, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you both for that. That was very clear and concise. Thank you. Just a very quick question from me. The arrow confused me a wee bit. So it's 350k the minimum grant application?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, that is confusing, and I think we have corrected it on the website now. But yeah, the 350 is the minimum grant amount that we'd be looking to award to anyone. So it would be 350 and above proposals of that size that we'd be looking for.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else at the moment? Yeah, see something in chat, and then Alistair's raised his hand. So I'll just take the one in the chat first, Alistair, and then come to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine.
So Stephen has just asked, does the ICNZ Outer Hebrides Transition Fund support innovative technologies, for example, lower cost, lower profile, bird-friendly, slow rotating vertical axis wind turbines, with this align with the fund's goals for community and environmental benefits? I would say definitely, Stephen, we'd be open to that. And if it's kind of a development project of those turbines, alongside a building, or if it's just more of a trial of those, I think both options we'd be open. Yeah, definitely would be worth considering. So yeah, I would say yes in terms of to those. we're open to supporting those kind of technologies if there's a good case and a good project for those. Just go to Alistair and then come back to the questions in the chat.
Thanks. In terms of types of projects, and you've mentioned the possibility of coming forward with a variety of projects. There is one particular project, and I'm thinking about perhaps the Sandwick Hill School, where the community have already done a lot of work and a lot of preparation for the purchase of Sandwick School and its transition into a community hub, which would obviously want to feature energy saving as part of the package. Is that something that you would think could potentially come into the type of project you would want information on?
I think it potentially could answer, but I think it's likely, just in terms of where the focus of the fund is, and also I guess I think there's an awareness from the board of the Island Centre for Net Zero at Hebrides that we don't want to be, I guess, replicating maybe where other sources of funding might be available, even if there's competition for those funds. We do want to be supporting things that are quite innovative and strategic in nature. So I think there could be. I'm not sure if that kind of project, although I agree, I think it would be incredibly beneficial, is exactly the right nature of what the fund is looking to support. I would say it's probably worth considering more, and I'd be happy to have a chat with you a bit more just to understand the specific elements of that redevelopment that might be relevant. But I think in general we'd probably be looking for projects that have more of a specific kind of focus and contribution to net zero or sustainability, rather than buildings that have that as part of their development, if that makes sense. But I'd be happy to kind of chat about that a little bit more. Okay, I'd just go to DJ, so we can have a length of project up to 7 years as of 2025. Yes, I think 6 years, just in terms of the profile of when we have the fund DJ, is what it would be. So the fund, the Islands Growth Deal, will end in 2033. I think, but our spend within that wider program, I think, comes to an end a year before the end. So I think we'd be looking at kind of 6-year timeline. And Peter, I saw you had your hand up a minute ago. But
I was just going to. Yeah, still here. I was just going to ask. It's welcome, but it's not a lot of money. That's 8 minimum projects. Yeah, 350. Is it something that's going to be replicated every year, or is it just a one-off?
This is just one pot of money we have, and we had been considering and looking at kind of staggering the fund a little bit more, but just because of how the kind of assessment process, again through the Islands Growth Deal, works, we're now looking to try and allocate that. It doesn't mean all projects need to start in 2025, but we are wanting to have an idea of where the funding is going to go. Unfortunately, that's all the funds we have in the Island Centre for Net Zero at this point. I mean, we will be trying to work with, to bring in match funding throughout the process, and part of the staff role that we have is kind of supporting organisations with that. So I would say, if we receive proposals that aren't selected to go forward, we'll still hopefully have those on the radar and be trying to make those with other large funding opportunities. But unfortunately, this 2.8 million pot is all we have at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Okay, I'm not seeing.
I'll ask another
anyone
question,
else.
Matthew.
Yeah, on you go, Peter. Yeah.
You mentioned it was government funding. That's Scottish government funding, yeah.
So it's both UK and Scottish government funding. So that the Islands
we
Growth
add
Deal.
it on?
Yeah.
Sorry, can we add it on to, like, say, for instance, we've been successful in bidding for funding every year. So are you allowed to kind of like combine it?
Yes. Yeah. You're allowed to combine it with other sources of government funding. Yeah. I think there are some processes we'd need to go through in terms of sort of state aid, ensuring it's not breaching any kind of guidelines there. But as in a general principle, yes, you're allowed. So the Creed project that I gave as an example received a large amount of their match funding from another Scottish government fund, and it wasn't an issue there.
Yeah, that was what was worrying, because that looked like a 2.8 million project. It would just be the one project. So if we could combine it with other funding, then that then allows bigger projects to go ahead with smaller funding from yourselves, and they can spread it more across, because it's going to be a wee bit of a battle between everybody to apply for it.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think it's slightly. We definitely would encourage match funding, and I think that would obviously really kind of be beneficial to applications and proposals. But we're also aware of the challenges that securing match funding can have, and currently, you know, the kind of large demand there is for match funds when they appear. So, yeah, I think it's not an essential part of you know, proposals at the moment, because we are kind of prepared if needed to, you know, be largely funding something or fully funding something. But as you say, Peter, if possible, to get match funding, and we can spread the impact of this fund on a, you know, across a wider number of projects, and that would be, yeah, ideal for us.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for that.
Okay. Anybody else got any thoughts or anything at all? Stephen, do you want to come in?
Hi, just to clarify the situation on the funding, am I right that I picked up this as is claimed back in arrears? Is there any scope, meaning that we're going to have to come to the island and set up the potential business, fund the expenses ourselves, and then claim back in arrears? Is that's the case? And if it is the case, there's no flexibility?
Yes, that is the case, and there's not been any examples in terms of again across the wider Islands Growth Deal where there has been particular flexibility for that. I'm afraid it's just the kind of nature of how the deal is set up. It's essentially claiming back quarterly in arrears, so it's it's not, you know, kind of over the course of a year. So that maybe makes it slightly more manageable, but I do understand it's, you know, it's asking people to put a lot of costs up front. That process will probably just be handled directly with whoever's got the successful proposal and the Corla, as they're the kind of the grant holder, the grant recipient. So there might be some scope for discussion with them, but I think it's unlikely that will change, unfortunately, Stephen.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
David.
Yeah, just a follow up from Stephen's question there. In regards to sort of large scale, if it's geared towards capital purchases, large scale capital purchases, would you be expecting them to be paid in advance, and how would that sort of fit? Would it be the same sort of criteria?
At the moment, it would be the same, David, and that's how it's proceeded with the Creed project in terms of their purchases they've made up front and then claimed back in arrears. So I think at the moment that would be the way forward. But I would say if that is kind of the key concern to anybody, and I understand it, it may very well be worth dropping us a line and getting in touch, and we can have a bit more of a discussion with the Corla and possibly with the governments in terms of the island's growth deal about just how to kind of overcome those barriers, as we wouldn't want that to be the thing that kind of stops a good project going ahead. Okay, Stephen, you still got your hand up, but I assume that's just from your previous question. I don't know if anyone else has any questions at this point. No, not seeing anything. Okay, well, we'll maybe wrap up there then. But as we said, we'll be uploading a little bit more information in terms of the annex and just how those criteria break down within the next week or so. And Joan and I are available if anyone has any further questions, and happy to kind of set up one-on-one chats just to kind of go through things and go through your specific questions in a bit more detail. And also keep your eyes peeled for another Q&A session in February. At that point, maybe people will have had a bit more time to digest the guidance and kind of work their project through. So we'll email that around to everyone as well. But just keep an eye on that for some point during the middle of February. Okay. And just to say thanks then again for coming along. Hope that was a useful session. Understand there's quite a lot of information to digest, but please do just get in touch if you have any questions, and we can hopefully clarify any areas needing clarified. Okay, thanks very much everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.